The labor force, or what we usually call economically active population, refers to all persons aged 15 years and older who are either working or actively looking for work. Employed persons are those who did at least 1 hour of paid work or worked in a family business during the reference period. Unemployed persons are those who were not working but were available for work. An unemployment rate, which you would hear very often today, is the unemployed as a ratio of the labor force. Labor force participation rate tells us about the proportion of the working age population 15 years and older that is either employed or unemployed. It is employed plus unemployed as a share of the working age population. The absorption rate shows how many people in the labor force are actually employed or are actually employed as a share of the working age population. And then we have what we refer to as the NEET, which is youth not in employment, education, or training. And that refers to young people who are not in employment, in other words, they are not working, who are not in education, and then who are also not training. And the NEET rate is basically the share of this number out of the total youth population. And we'd also be talking about underutilization, which captures people who are working, but they want more hours, they are unemployed, or are available for work, but not actively searching. And then we have persons outside the labor force. And these are age 15 and above, but neither working nor available for work. This group shows both potential reserves of labor and barriers to participation. And usually the group would include students in full-time education, not seeking work. And then they would also include homemakers managing households without seeking jobs. We have retirees who no longer are active in the labor market. And then we have discouraged workers who stop searching due to lack of opportunities. Then we have persons with disabilities or illness, unable or unwilling to work. And also others engaged in unpaid activities or personal commitments. So these definitions follow international standards that we have adapted, recommended by the International Labour Organization, ensuring comparability and credibility. And I must say that in Ghana, we've adapted the most recent standard among African countries. And again, that's one of the things that the country is known for. Now, let me share with you some few indicators we are introducing in this round of quarterly labor force survey. The first is qualification and skills mismatch. This tells us whether people's education and skills match the jobs they are doing. It also identifies overqualification, underqualification, and unused skills. The second concept we are introducing in this round is shift-based work. And this measures how many people work outside normal daytime hours, including evening and then night shifts. Now, as we know, this is very critical for understanding Ghana's move towards the 24-hour economy program. Let's jump into the key results. So first, I would want to talk about the size of the labor force and employment trends. across the first 3 quarters of 2025, more than 15 million people were in Ghana's labor force. Importantly, employment increased over the period. By Q3, we saw more than 300,000 additional people who were employed compared with Q1. Now, let's look at this employed persons by sex. In all 3 sectors, or let me say all 3 quarters, female employment was consistently higher than male employment. In fact, over 7.2 million women were employed compared to about 6 million men. This highlights the central role women play in Ghana's labor market, particularly in services, trade, and household enterprises. However, as I will show very soon, higher employment rates does not always mean better job quality. We'll talk about quality very soon. Now let's look at the employed persons by type of locality. In other words, whether they are from rural areas or urban centers. Employment was consistently higher in urban areas than in rural areas. And the data shows that the gap was largest actually in Q2, when about 1.5 million more people were employed in urban areas than in rural areas. More specifically, in Q3 of 2025, we had 7.5 million people who were employed in urban areas. And then we had 5.95 million people employed in rural areas. This reflects continued rural to urban economic concentration and uneven spatial development. Now let's look at labor force participation and absorption rates. Labor force participation remained strong across all 3 quarters of 2025. In fact, about 3 quarters, and more precisely, 75.1% of the working age population participated in the labor market in the 3rd quarter of 2025. Absorption rates closely tracked participation. And this means that most people who entered into the labor force were absorbed into employment. So, for example, 65.3% of the working age population, that's the population aged 15 years and above, were employed or absorbed in Q3 of 2025. However, absorption does not automatically mean productive or secure work, which is why quality indicators matter. Now, let's talk about unemployment rates. The overall unemployment rate averaged 12.8% across the 3 quarters, that's Q1, 2, 3 of 2025, reducing from 12.8% in Q1, 2025, to 12.6% in Q2 of 2025, before increasing slightly to 13% in Q3 of 2025. Female unemployment was consistently higher than male unemployment, with an average gap of 3.7 percentage points across the 3 quarters. And if you look at the gap in the 3rd quarter of 2025, we are looking at 3.6 percentage points. Let's look at unemployment rates by locality. We see that urban unemployment averaged 15.1%, over the period, compared to 9.6% in rural areas, with the highest gap of 6.2 percentage points occurring in Q2 of 2025. In Q3 of 2025, urban unemployment rate was 15.4%, compared to rural unemployment rate of 9.8%, giving a gap of 5.6 percentage points. In simple language, unemployment is significantly more severe in cities than in rural communities. This is likely reflecting the high competition for limited formal jobs in urban areas. Let's look at unemployment rate by region. So here we see regional disparities, and they are quite pronounced. Across the 3 quarters, 4 regions, namely Western Region, Central Region, Greater Accra Region, and Ashanti Region, consistently recorded unemployment rate above the national level. You recall that I had indicated that the unemployment rate for Q3 2025 was 13%. So these 4 regions that I've mentioned actually recorded unemployment rates higher than this 13%. Again, 4 regions recorded a decline in unemployment rates between Q2 and Q3. So which are these regions that are seeing decline in unemployment rates? So this includes Greater Accra, whose unemployment rate reduced from 20.2% in Q2 to 19.6% in Q3. Then we have Volta Region, whose unemployment rate reduced from 11.9% in Q2 to 11.4% in Q3. And then we have Bono, whose unemployment rate reduced from 10% in Q2 to 9.4% in Q3. And the Northern Region, which saw an unemployment rate decline from 7.8% in Q2 to 7.4% in Q3. This is a clear signal of labor market pressure in metropolitan areas. Now, let's look at youth unemployment. Youth unemployment remains a major concern. The last time we released the Q4 2024 labor statistics, youth unemployment was a concern. And the recent data we've collected still shows that it continues to be a major concern. In fact, among those aged 15 to 24 years, unemployment averaged 32.5% between Q2 and Q3, reaching 34.4% in Q3 of 2025. So the way we can contextualize this is to relate this to the national unemployment rate. So if nationally, the unemployment rate is 13%, and we have the youth who are within the age bracket 15 to 24 years, recording unemployment rate of 34.4% in Q3, then that's quite high, way higher than the national average. For the broader age group, 15 to 35 years, unemployment averaged 21.9%, reaching 23.2% in Q3 of 2025. Now we see that Greater Accra Region recorded the highest youth unemployment for both age groups. If you are talking about the age group between 15 and 24 years, for Greater Accra, the unemployment rate was 49.3%. And if you are talking about the age group 15 to 24 years, 15 to 35 years, then we are recording unemployment rates which are also very, very high. In contrast, regions like Bono East region recorded very low unemployment rates, with 15.1% in Q3 for persons within the age group 15 to 24 years, and 10.1% in Q3 for persons within the age group 15 to 35 years. These are not abstract figures. They represent millions of young Ghanaians searching for opportunity. Now, let's look at a very important indicator, which is what we refer to as youth not in employment, education, or training. And the data collected shows that in the third quarter of 2025, about 1.34 million young people aged between 15 to 24 years, roughly about 21.5% of them, were not in employment, education, or training. And that statistic is quite alarming. For those aged 15 to 35, the number rose to 1.95 million people, or 19.5%. For persons aged 15 to 35 years, need levels varied across regions, ranging from highest Central region, 25.3%, to the lowest, which is OT region, 9.5%. So these are critical risks for long-term productivity, social inclusion, and national growth, which must be watched carefully. Now let's look at labor underutilization rates. About 1 in 5 employed persons were underutilized in terms of labor. The composite underutilization rate was 23% in Q2 of 2025 and 23.4% in Q3 of 2025. Underemployment was higher in rural areas. In fact, in Q3 it was 14.9% than in urban areas, where we recorded underemployment of 9.7%, likely reflecting seasonal and informal work patterns. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's look at one of the new indicators we introduced in this round of survey. And here we are looking at skills mismatch. In Q3 2025, about 2/3, or more specifically, 65.8% of employed persons felt their skills matched their jobs. 1 in 5, or more precisely, 20.7% were unsure whether their skills matched their jobs. But we saw more than 10% actually believing that their skills exceeded job requirements, particularly so for men. 11.6% of them believed so, and also particularly so for urban workers, where 10.6% of urban workers believe so. A smaller share, 3.3%, felt underskilled, with higher levels among males, that's 3.4%, and rural workers, 3.4%. This shows inefficiencies in how skills are utilized. Then the other related indicator we tracked was qualification mismatch. And the data shows that in Q3 of 2025, nearly 58.4% of workers felt their education matched their job requirements. Only 8.2% felt overqualified, whilst 15.7% felt underqualified. And overqualification was more pronounced among men, 9.5%, and also among urban workers, 9.4%. Under qualification, let me also say that the results we are seeing with regards to qualification mismatch highlights gaps in training, certification, and lifelong learning. And then we also looked at participation in shift-based work, which I mentioned is very relevant for the 24-hour economy program. In each of quarter 2 and quarter 3 of 2024, almost 98% of workers did not work night shifts. Only 1.6% worked regular night shifts. In fact, night shift participation is slightly higher among men. Here we saw the figure to be 3.2% of regular or occasional group, and also higher among urban localities, 3.5%. Now, let's look at workers who express interest in shift-based work, even though currently we have only a small proportion of them that are doing night shift work or shift-based work. So the results show that interest in shift-based work is actually growing. In quarter 3 of 2025, about 47% of workers who are currently not in shift work express interest, especially men, which is about 54%, and also especially for rural workers, about 52% who express such interest. So it means that even though currently we have only a small proportion of workers who are doing shift work or shift-based work, whether night or other shifts, but there's a huge potential, as we have about 47% of workers who are currently not embarked in that exercise wanting to do so. The data also shows that women and urban workers were more likely to report that they would not be interested in shift-based work. This signals potential for a 24-hour economy if the right protections and the right incentives are provided. Given that we have, in the minimum, about 47% of those who are not already in that shift-based work wanting to embark on those. Now, with these results, ladies and gentlemen, let me summarize so that we can focus on the key takeaways. First, we've seen that employment is growing, but not fast enough to absorb the population pressures. In fact, about 15 million persons were employed across the three sectors, the 3 quarters of the year. Secondly, we've seen that gender, youth, urban, and regional disparities remain significant. Third, we've also seen that underutilization and very high NEET levels pose serious risks. Fourth, skills and qualification mismatches are prevalent, and we know that they reduce productivity. So it's something that we must watch. Fifth, we've seen that there is openness to flexible work arrangements. With these findings, ladies and gentlemen, as has been the practice of Ghana Statistical Service in recent times, based on the data, we are proposing the following recommendations. For government, we are recommending expansion of the TVET program, digital skills, apprenticeships, school-to-work transitions, and targeted skills development for young people, particularly those not in employment, education, or training. For the private sector, we are recommending that they do investment in training, in apprenticeship opportunities, in internships, and data-driven workforce planning, and adapt responsible shift-based work practices where practicable. After all, the data shows that workers are willing to embark on shift-based work. Ladies and gentlemen, for households and individuals, we are recommending that they pursue continuous learning, certification, and cooperative participation. In conclusion, the Ghana Statistical Service remains fully committed to producing timely, accurate, relevant, and credible statistics for evidence-based decision-making. We thank all households who provided information. We want to express our appreciation to our field officers who went to the field to collect data for us, and also the hard-working staff of the Ghana Statistical Service who worked tirelessly to make this possible, and the government of Ghana and the World Bank for providing funding for this survey. Ladies and gentlemen, we also want to use this opportunity to thank the media who are always with us, helping us disseminate these important findings that we unearth in all our surveys. We can't thank you enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Alassane, for the presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed the release of the labor statistics for Q1 to 3 of 2025. We invite questions, contributions, clarifications from you. So if you have any question, please raise your hand. There's a mic, please.
Hello. Look, good morning, Francis here,
Yeah.
GNA. Look, you did indicate that Accra, Volta, Bono, and Northern regions recorded decline in unemployment rates. What's accounting for this decline? Who is employing them, and which sectors are recording these employment figures? Also, for those in need that youth not in employment, education, or training, about 1.3 million of them. You've already indicated how worrying this is. Did you find out where they are and what they are doing? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's take some more questions.
Doc, if there are no, let me add one on the 24-hour economy.
All right.
The interest is high, but currently is very low when it comes to how it is performing. What will be your recommendations, particularly to the government and the private sector?
Okay. Can I ask? Okay, let's take some more questions.
All right. My name is Pius Kojobaka from Joy News. A follow-up on his question with regards to the 24-hour economy initiative. Don't you think it's worrying getting to know that 98% of workers did not want to work night shift compared to 1.6 as we have been told by government how the policy will be run?
So let me correct that before, because that's not what we said. So we said that currently, about 98% of the workers are not in shift base. It doesn't mean that they said they don't want to. But there was also another statistic which indicated that about 46 or 47% of workers are expressing interest in working in shift-based employment. So it's not the case that 98% says they are not.
All right.
Rather, we are talking about the current situation, where about 98% are not in shift-based employment.
I get it.
Right?
Yeah, I get
So,
it. Thank you.
but the good news is that about 46 or 47% of them, those who are not in shift-based, are saying they are interested in engaging in shift-based employment. Okay. Yes. If these are all the questions I will respond to, let me respond to the questions that came. So first question, we mentioned that if you take regions like Volta, like Bono, and then you have northern regions, we've seen some slight declines in unemployment rate. Okay, so the question that Francis is asking is what is accounting for this decline and which sectors? Unfortunately, we are not able to tell you the reasons behind the decline because and we don't want to hazard any response because the questionnaire did not provide questions to that effect. So we are not able to provide that response. And then you ask a question about needs. Where they are, where are they? These are young guys. They are aged between 15 to 24 years. Even if you extend the age bracket, right, who are not in employment and they are not in education as well, and they are not being trained or they are not in training as well. And that's a very dangerous group because at least if they are in education, then we can say that they are not working possibly because they are in education. And also they are adding capacity to themselves and they are making themselves employable, even though they may not be employed. But if you are not in education, you are not in training. At the same time, you are not in employment. That's very risky. So as much as possible, that ratio should be as low as possible. The fact that we have high numbers means that we really have to do a lot more to bring those numbers down. Then there was a question about 24-hour economy. What advice would we give to government and the private sector? The advice is very simple. The advice is that our data shows that there is appetite to work shift-based or to engage in what? Shift-based work. That's what the data is telling us. In other words, the data is telling us that about 47% of those who were interviewed are expressing and are currently not in what? Shift-based work, occupation, are expressing interest to work in what? Shift-based work. And that's very, very positive. So the advice to government is that once that appetite is there, it bodes well for the 24-hour economy. So let's provide the various protection to ensure that people who are ready to work within that environment are protected. Let's provide the standards so that even if the private sector is taking advantage of the opportunity, those standards are observed. Then for the private sector, I think it's also very positive that you have a group of people who are saying that we want to work on shift basis. I think that's also very, very positive. So this means that it's a potential that the private sector can take advantage of and expand their economic activities or their operations by bringing those workforce on board. Okay. Any more questions? Yeah.
Right, thank you. Yeah. Good morning, Prof. I am Juliet Etefe with the Business and Financial Times. I am trying to connect the dot between employed person by sex and also the expression of interest in shift-based work, and then also the 24-hour economy. Under the employed person by sex, we noted that employment is consistently higher among female than male. But then at the point where expression of interest in shift-based work, we also noted that interest, about 45.4% of women who were more likely to report that they would not be interested. Then I'm also looking at the 24-hour economy. Have we been able to ascertain why this group of the gender may not be interested in the shift, given that their employment is increasing? Thank you.
All right. So let's take some more and then we respond to it. Okay. So otherwise, I think the straightforward answer to that is that it is positive that we have, in total, about 47% of those who are not in shift-based work say that they want to work shift-based. That's very positive. The statistics is telling us that it is more, men are more likely to be in this group than what? Than women. Your concern is that what can we do to actually encourage women to also be interested? That's basically, if I put it in simple language, that's what it means. Especially given the fact that if you look at the number of people who are employed, we have more females who are employed than what? Than males. So that's a potential. So what that means is that we need to interrogate exactly why it is the case. Unfortunately, our survey questions now is not able to get the reasons, but these are very useful questions which we may throw in subsequent waves so that when we ask those questions, we'll be able to get the responses to that. But I see that as a potential. So what we need to do is that government must make sure that it funds either research, it gives us more money, statistical service more money for us to do more work, and then we'll be able to ascertain or know the reasons. And then that can inform, once you know what the reasons are, then it's very easy to actually target specific interventions to ensure that you whet the appetite of the females to be interested in shift-based employment. I don't want to hazard guess because our questionnaire didn't touch on that. And then also, even for the private sector, right? I mean, given that you have more females in the employed, the private sector should also be interested in ensuring that they are finding out why. Is it that it's males who are interested to do the shift-based work? What is the issue? If, for example, the issue is something that can easily be resolved at that level, interventions can be made, and then we can increase that ratio. That's how I like to respond to this question. Thank you very much. Any more? Yeah.
So we are grateful for your participation, and we look forward to inviting you to another event in the coming weeks. Let's have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.